And I would love to go back to, you said that they
Yeah.
observed couples and they could tell which ones were going to be okay and which ones weren't. Do you know what exactly they were looking for? How could they tell that by observing them?
Today, we're joined by Modern Therapy's own Cory, who is an LPC, to talk all things couples counseling, what really happens in the therapy room, how conflict impacts connection, and why small changes can lead to big shifts. We dive into the Gottman Method, emotional regulation, and practical tools for communicating better, repairing after arguments, and building a stronger relationship.
The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is a really fun name when you say that in front of couples and you see their faces. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. My favorite part of the whole Gottman thing is as our body's filling up with more cortisol, we can only hold so much. It's kind of like that pot that's boiling on the stove. Like, it's going to boil over if you don't turn down the flame. Me asking you, do you want to go to this movie, is my bid for attention. I want to connect with you in this way. You either turn towards a bid or you turn away from a bid. And a lot of times where couples are getting stuck is they're turning away. There's all these bids, they're flying everywhere, and they're turning away from all of them because they're not seeing them the way that they need to be seen.
All right. Well, we are so excited to have you here today. Today we have Cory, who is actually a therapist at Modern Therapy, who specializes in working with couples. We're so happy to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in.
Sure.
Can you tell us about your backgrounds and what made you want to work with couples in the first place?
I got into therapy starting at a nonprofit community agency, so you're just like exposed to everything, right? There is no like, this is my specialty. Your specialty is people.
Yeah.
So predominantly my career was more in like children and adolescents, which got into some family work. And it wasn't until last year I actually started working in a perinatal program in the agency that I was working for. So naturally, just a lot of younger couples just struggling with communication and raising kids, and just kind of found it was like working like in a weird way. I was enjoying it. They seemed to be getting something out of it. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something here. So when I was really thinking about taking the next step in my career, and it's like, okay, what is my niche exactly? I was like, well, maybe couples. And it was interesting because a lot of therapists I find stray away from couples therapy. So it's a very underserved like population. So I was like, all right, well, I'm enjoying this. People seem to be getting something out of it, and there's a huge need for it. Let me just kind of lean into it, and hopefully it goes somewhere. So it's been a wild ride, but definitely one I'm happy I jumped on.
Yeah, I definitely see it's very polarized.
Yes.
Some therapists love working with couples. Like you said, it's their niche. They find it, it works. And then other therapists are really scared of doing couples counseling or maybe have had bad experiences. What do you think is the reason it's such a polarized population to work with?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an anxiety on the therapist side of like, I don't know if it's working with 2 people instead of 1. Probably the conflict. I think people are afraid of how am I going to manage the conflict? And I totally get that because there are times where couples just, it's couples therapy. Like they're going to go at it once in a while and it's overwhelming and you're like, what do I do? And you feel like you lose control. But if you do it more, you find that it really doesn't make so much of a difference because you can have couples who are super constructive and they might still have their issues, but they're able to work through it, and have an individual who just loses awareness just as much as some couples do. So I would encourage anybody who's ambivalent, just give it a try. You never know how it's going to work until you get in front of that person, and at least you can say, I tried it and it wasn't for me, instead of avoiding it completely. But I think that feeds to why it's so polarizing, because I think people think it's more than they want to handle or feel like they can handle.
On the other end of things, it's also kind of polarizing on the client side.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a lot of clients who are hesitant to jump into couples counseling. A lot of times there's one party that is really gung-ho about it, and then there's another party that is a little bit more like sometimes being dragged there. So.
Yeah, sometimes it's mutual. I mean, and that's always the ideal scenario. It certainly isn't foreign for one person to be the instigator of the couples therapy. There are times where one person will bring their partner in because they want, like, the therapist is going to convince them and help them see the light on something.
Fix my husband for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked some couples because I started getting that feeling. I was like, did you guys come because you wanted me to talk some sense into him or her?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah. So that can happen a lot. Yeah.
It's really funny. It reminds me of, there's a show Ozark, and there's an episode
goodness.
where the main character and his wife are going to couples counseling, and they're both shifty characters.
Yeah.
And it shows them doing couples counseling with the therapist, and it turns out both of them are actually paying the therapist on the side to side with them to make the other one look like.
But did the therapist, I don't even watch Ozark, but I had to watch this part of it. Didn't the therapist like confront both of them in the session?
Yeah.
Like say, because she bought a new car or
Yeah,
something
she
with
bought
the
a
money.
Lambo with
Oh my God.
Don't worry, that doesn't happen at modern therapy.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, I just thought that was a funny dynamic, because I think sometimes couples just are kind of unaware of what to expect with couples counseling and what that looks like. So for people who aren't really sure what couples counseling is going to look like, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say it's really not that much different than individual therapy. It's just more people. Definitely what feeds the anxiety for some couples is that the therapist will side with one over the other, or it's about picking who's right and who's wrong and things like that. And I can't fault people for not wanting to have a stranger tell them that they're wrong when what do I know about your life to begin with? So it's really just giving it that opportunity of let's see how this goes. And it honestly, more often than not, for the ambivalent partner who thought I was going to take sides, is like, oh, you're actually more neutral than I thought you're gonna be. And that falls on the therapist, right? To be that neutral Switzerland in this whole thing. But that definitely deters people, as they just don't want to feel like they're in the wrong, or they've been told they were wrong so much by their partner. They're like, well, so now I'm going to bring in this other person that also tell me that I'm wrong. It's the same thing people for individual therapy won't go, is they don't want somebody telling them what they should be doing or how to live their life. So that's something I'd want to get across to anybody, especially for couples, that it's not about winning and losing. And if anything, that's what we're trying to get away from. That's not a competition. It's trying to figure out what's going on that's leading to all this conflict and this cycle that you're stuck in. So that's really what it's about. So if more couples understood that, I think more people would be willing to at least give it a try.
And that's one of the big issues that people come in with, right? It's that keeping the score and the only focusing on what's wrong. And instead of taking sides, you're going to step back and say, well, why are we doing this in the first place, right? You're going to look at that kind of overarching issue and say, well, why are we keeping score in the first place? Like, that's going to be something you work on, rather than, okay, yep, you get a tally here and you get a tally here.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, people, they're oddly motivated to keep score. And I think it's because they're so used to it. You know, and by the time they come to couples therapy, sometimes it's so far gone into the conflict that it's like, this is the only way they know how to communicate is, but I'm doing this, but I'm doing that. And where I observe is, it's almost like one partner will say their piece and the other one goes, yeah, but this. And then the other partner takes that as, okay, you didn't hear me, so let me just reemphasize my point. Then the other partner goes, okay, but you're not hearing me, so let me reemphasize my point. And they just go back and forth. And that's where, to me, it feels like scorekeeping, because it's like, who's just going to rack up more, but I'm right than the other, as if I'm going to come in, blow the whistle, and go, all right, you have 10 to 12, you're the winner of this round. You know, so what I try to do at least is to show people, I'm not keeping score, so if I'm not going to keep score, why are you keeping score? But I do find that a lot of couples are unconsciously motivated to want to be right.
So as a therapist, as Switzerland, how do you break that?
You have to find a way to see it from both angles, because it's not about what I personally think or agree. And a lot of people are like, but what if you think like X, Y, and Z? And it doesn't matter what I think, because that's not being neutral. It's helping. It's almost like modeling for them. Here's where I can hear it from your perspective. Here's where I can hear it from your perspective. And perspectives are subjective. So technically you're both right. So there's no point in arguing who's right and who's wrong. You're just both seeing it differently. So if we can agree that you're just seeing it differently, we can talk out those differences, and maybe there's more overlap than we originally thought. But if we get so caught up in the contrast of everything, then it's going to feel like this game of tug of war that we're just constantly fighting.
Yeah, and that is probably just so indicative of what happens at home in their everyday life. Like, this is how they're communicating. And I think there's probably a lot of couples who are scared, I'm going to go to therapy and we're going to fight in front of our therapist and they're going to think all these things. Where actually, although it's hard, you don't want to feel like you're refereeing a fight, it's probably beneficial, at least in the beginning, to see some of those fights and to see those communication patterns. Because if people show up and they're not doing that, it might be hard for you to actually know what is really going on there.
Yeah, there are a lot of times where I almost wish it was more ethical and legal to put cameras in like the real world and observe, because I want to see them in like their natural environment, so to speak, because I've always been under the belief that what I'm getting in the therapist room or in the video call is a watered down version,
Yeah.
right? Especially in the beginning when I first meet couples, like my high conflict couples, it always starts out, things are calm, and because everyone's trying to, and then once that comfort is there, now the real stuff comes out. And I only get them for an hour. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes when somebody's not watching. So definitely I'm just getting snippets of that communication pattern. I really actually try to make a point to not referee. If I'm going to be a referee of anything, it's like a hockey referee where you just kind of let them fizzle out, because I want them to build that awareness that, hey, we're so lost in this back and forth that some couples have actually recognized they forgot I was there. Because they just get so entrenched in the conflict. And that's intentionally why I don't jump in, because I want them to build that awareness to go, hey, we're getting so lost in it. Let's remember why we're here in the first place. If I just keep jumping in, and if they're already up here, now I have to get louder to talk over them or cut them off. That's an aggressive approach. They didn't come for more aggression, right? So instead, I'm trying to take it more of a modeling, just staying grounded, being the calm in the room. And I feel like even if they are getting very conflictual, just my calming presence can just weather the storm enough that we can still work on something.
Yeah. I mean, in a scenario like that, the conflict is kind of productive.
In a way, yeah. And that's why I take that opportunity to sit back and observe, because it gives me a chance to really pick up on patterns and themes. And a lot of where I've been able to use the Gottman method to apply, now I'm seeing how this critical dialogue is really impacting you guys and how it's leading to this defensiveness and why that person's shutting down. So I try to explain a lot of the physiology behind like what's going on in these conflicts, to explain that the person's not just trying to be stubborn or difficult. There's something actually going on in their body that explains all of this. And I found over time that people are responding very well to that physiology.
Yeah. So you mentioned Gottman. You are certified.
Yes.
Gottman level 1. Woo woo. So cool. Can you explain to us, what is the Gottman Method? Why is it the gold standard for couples therapy?
The name is definitely more well known than what actually is behind the name.
Yeah.
So the Gottman Method was developed by Doctors John and Julie Gottman, so a married couple who both do couples therapy professionally, and they did the best kind of research, which is just actually doing it and observing. That's why I've leaned so much on the observing piece, because I'm trying to model what they did and how they picked up on these patterns, right? So they just thousands of couples over decades, I think like for over 4 decades of research, they just observe people. It was interesting. They did some studies where they actually had couples in a room where they observed them on camera and just observing their dialogue and picking up on patterns. And what they found is they're able to tell which couples will work and which couples won't based on those patterns of communication. So what that said is that just because you're having conflict doesn't mean it's not going to work. It's how we're communicating and the patterns that we're engaging in. So if we can change the patterns of communication, we can resolve conflict, because conflict's inevitable.
Of course.
It's always going to be in any relationship. There is no such thing as the conflictualist relationship. That'd be great. The thing they preach the most is that you're not working with them to be the perfect couple. You're working with them to be the good enough couple, which sounds kind of like, ew, we're just good enough. But the idea is you're at a place where you have the skill set to weather the storm on your own and manage the conflict, not necessarily avoiding it altogether. So what really separates the Gottman method from other methods of therapy or even couples therapy is that it really focuses on tools and actual applicable skills that couples can use to change their communication patterns. And it very much focuses on building trust and empathy and understanding, which tends to get lost in conflict. So they created the Sound Relationship House model, which is basically a roadmap for how you bring people back together. And the whole foundation is just based on trust and understanding. So most people know about love languages. They may not know what they are, but they know the name love languages. That comes from Gottman. And it's really about just how well do you know each other? What makes that person tick? What makes them feel heard and seen? And a lot of times people's love languages are not the same. So they get lost in that, well, my love language isn't being spoken, so I'm not going to speak yours. So we got to flip that script. If you just start speaking each other's love languages, you're both going to feel more heard and seen by your partner, and that's going to bring you closer together. So that's a lot of what the Gottman model is based off and why it's so effective, because it really gives people things they can do in live time as opposed to just trying to numb the conflict in a way.
I actually love the good enough mindset, because I think so many couples come to therapy and they think, oh, we failed because we had a fight last week. And that's not a failure. You're going to fight. You're going to have conflict. But like you said, how do you manage it? What does that fight look like? Because there's different levels to it. And having conflict is completely normal in a relationship. And I think if someone has that expectation of, I'm going to have this perfect relationship and we're never going to fight, they're just setting themselves up for failure.
100%. And actually, it's the good enough model helps me as well as the therapist, because otherwise there's all this pressure. Oh, they're still fighting. Am I doing a good enough job? Am I actually helping them? But if the goal is just to get them good enough, and we all understand what good enough means, then the pressure comes off of everybody, because that means, oh, you had a fight, but let's talk about the fight. Was the fight the same as the fight you had 2 months ago? When's the last time you actually had a big fight? What was different about this fight than the last one? So if anything, those fights are good because they give us an opportunity to really assess what worked and what didn't. And is fight even the right word? Was it just like a spiff or just a misunderstanding perhaps? So I agree with you that it definitely helps everybody just looking at it from good enough instead of squeaky clean and perfect.
Yeah. And I would love to go back to, you said that they observed couples and they could tell which ones were going to be okay and which ones weren't. Do you know what exactly they were looking for? How could they tell that by observing them?
Yeah. So they observed, they call them the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is a really fun name when you say that in front of couples and you see their faces.
You get their attention with that.
I really grab their attention. I feel like I have to drop the apocalypse part because then it changes the whole dynamic. But they found that the 4 Horsemen, which in other words is just like the 4 real Achilles heels to communication, are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So that critical dialogue of you're doing this, you're doing that, as opposed to coming from I feel this way. So when you point the finger at someone, it's very aggressive. That person's going to become exactly. And usually criticism they found is coupled with contemptuous language. So when they say contemptuous, they mean you're trying to gain the high ground through like mockery, basically. So I'll see couples, they'll mock each other's voices and they'll use like a very like satirical kind of tone to make the person seem ridiculous, or they'll use very hyperbolic explanations to explain what their person was doing. And it's to basically mock them, to put them on a higher ground. And the more couples do that, if you think about it, in trying to resolve this conflict, I'm going to point out your wrongdoings and then I'm going to mock you. And then I'm going to be confused why you're not seeing it my way, right?
We're not going to get very far with that.
Right, exactly. And that's where it leads to the third one of defensiveness, because now that person's in a state where they have to protect themselves because now there's a threat. My partner is now attacking me, essentially. And the fourth one of stonewalling, which was actually helpful to really learn the actual definition of stonewalling, because a lot of people take stonewalling as they just leave the room. Like, I'm done with this conversation, goodbye. So I see that more as like stiff arming. Like, I'm literally stiff arming you out of the way because I'm done here. Stonewalling is the complete shutdown of emotion. So it's like the lights are on, nobody's home. And what happens is people get so overwhelmed with stress that the body can't handle it. And they just completely shut down. And couples see that as like withdrawal, so it gets them more amped up, instead of, but I'm trying to help them see the person shutting down. That's a sign that this isn't working. So we got to take that step back and reset. So they found those were the 4 biggest catalysts to the couples that don't work out too well. And they obviously lead into other principles, but when they're unable to change those, or the more they engage in them is just like routine and habit, the Gottmans found that like typically it's just a matter of time, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's so profound. And when couples come to you, are you seeing that most of them have an awareness that this is happening, or do you think a lot of the work starts with that education? They're not even realizing that they're doing this.
I think some do to a degree. It depends also when they come to couples therapy, like at what stage.
Because there's a spectrum.
Yeah, and I've seen all sides of it. I've seen the ones where young 20-somethings who have been dating for 5 months, and the couples who have been married for years with kids and everything in between. So it depends on how long they've been together, how well do they really know each other, have they been through conflict before, how have they resolved that conflict or worked through it. So that awareness piece varies. Some are aware that what they're doing isn't working, and they know that, and that enough sometimes is enough to get us off the ground. And some are aware that things are really bad, but they just have no way of knowing how to navigate it. But with those couples, it's really challenging because it becomes all they know is conflict. So even though I'm trying to give all this education, and that's why I lean so hard on the physiology to take it away from the person aspect and more of the human being aspect, and sometimes that does work. A lot of people that I find, they're very interested in the education because it's something that they just where are they going to learn this? Why would the casual person be learning about the physiology
Right.
of the human body during
Right.
high intense conflict? Now, I think some also find the education very helpful, but they don't know how to apply the education. And that also depends on the degree of conflict that they're in. Are they actually in a place where they're willing and even want to apply it? And they say they do, but I don't know how much. Sometimes I think sometimes we're so motivated to want to be right that we're learning things, but we're not applying it. Or I'll get some couples where one partner feels like they're applying it and the other one isn't. But these are new concepts, right? Think about anything new that you've learned, no matter what it is. It's very hard to get that rhythm.
Yeah.
So I think especially if couples are coming very late in the game as far as the conflict, they want to see that result quick. And it's hard for a lot of people. This is not like common sense stuff. So when they don't see that progression fast enough, they lose the hope, unfortunately. So people have to understand, like, you got to play the long game, you know, and it's okay to be in couples therapy for months or even a couple of years, because it's about getting to that good enough place. And if that takes a couple of years, it takes a couple of years. So it's really about playing the long game.
Yeah. So you mentioned physiology and education. Can we unpack that a little bit? What does that mean?
Yeah. So this is like my favorite part of the whole Gottman thing. So when we're in a conflict, right? So our body's releasing cortisol. That's our stress hormone. And where the term flooding comes from is as our body's filling up with more cortisol, we can only hold so much. It's kind of like that pot that's boiling on the stove. Like, it's going to boil over if you don't turn down the flame. So what happens is when couples are getting into conflict, that flame's getting turned up. So the pot's boiling and boiling more, or for our bodies, we're releasing more cortisol and more. We're getting really stressed out. So when that happens, a bunch of different things are happening at the same time. So that's what leads to stonewalling, first off, is somebody gets so flooded with stress that their body just shuts down. It's basically like we're overloaded and we just have to basically go into recovery mode.
Can't handle anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just the pot's completely boiled over and we got to turn the stove off. What happens as we're getting stressed out is our sympathetic nervous system gets kicked in. So that's when we get those physiological responses. Our heart starts to race. We might get shaky, sweaty. Our stomach feels really uncomfortable. And that's our body saying, like, something's not right here. But that's our body also saying that there's a threat. And the brain, as advanced as it is, can't always differentiate what the threat is per se. It just sees threat. And that's just how we're wired as humans. If you go all the way back to prehistoric days, like caveman days, the threats were like, I'm going to get mauled when I go out looking for food. So that fight or flight response actually helped us survive as a species. Over time, our threats have become a little bit more complex than getting bashed over the head by a fellow caveman.
Yeah.
But the brain is just seeing it as this is a threat. So that throws us into that fight or flight response. So that's where people start seeing their partners as enemies, because the brain's like, conflict's coming from here. That's the source of the threat. Defend yourself. So that's why I explain a lot of the physiology to help people be like, the conflict is putting you both in fight or flight. You're both getting defensive. You're both getting stressed out because this conflict is a threat to both of you. There is a threat. It's just the situation. So if we can take that step back and go, it's not each other. It's what is going on in between the two of you that is leading to this conflict, right? We can lower the amount of stress that our body is being put under. And we want to reduce those sympathetic responses.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people see those sympathetic responses in their partners and they misinterpret them. What I want to help them see is that those responses, our bodies are like very good at letting us know something's up. So we really want to listen to our bodies. So that's what I want to help couples do, is you're getting all these warning signs from your body. Your heart's racing. You're having a headache. You can't think straight. And that should be a sign that something's up, that this isn't working. So we need to stop doing this and take that step back. That's why I lean a lot on that education. And I think the couples who are able to really latch onto it more, they're able to apply these skills more, because it gives them that other perspective of, oh, it's not just my person being difficult. There's something else going on here.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think that is it's a nicer way to talk about it than just to say, okay, you're doing this and you're doing that. It's like, I'm noticing that this is happening, and it's a physical response. Because I think sometimes when you talk about those emotional responses, people just get defensive in general, right? Okay, if this person brings this up and you're having this reaction, and then all of a sudden that person is uncomfortable talking about that. But I think going to the physiological pieces of it, that's just your body reacting.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think is probably almost easier to track than the emotional part. Someone can say, I'm starting to get a headache. I'm starting to feel this way or that way. And then they can know, okay, I have to turn this down a little bit. I have to do something. I have to regulate myself before I can have this conversation, which kind of brings us into a tactic you want to talk about, right? Let's jump into it. So what is it called? The power of taking 20 minutes.
Yeah. And this came from the Gottman training. And to me, this like the better people can utilize the 20-minute rule, I guess you can call it, the better things go. So the whole idea about the 20-minute model is what the Gottmans found from all their research, is that when the body's getting so flooded with stress, it's almost like a computer getting so overloaded with stuff. And whenever you call IT, what do they say? Unplug it, wait 30 seconds, plug it back in, because the computer needs 30 seconds to reboot itself. So that the 20 minutes is our reboot. When those sympathetic responses are going off, the heart racing, the sweating, those things, that's where I'll tell people what you need to do is you each need to go take 20 minutes. And the reason 20 minutes is so specific is the research found that the body needs at least 20 minutes. 10 minutes is not enough. 15 minutes is not enough. We literally need at least 20 minutes just for the body to stop producing that cortisol, de-stress. That's where people get lost, and they won't even let each other take the 20 minutes. So sometimes I'll get partners who are like, I'm trying to take the 20 minutes, but he or she won't let me. And I have to help them like really drive this point home. That 20 minutes is going to make or break everything here. Because when we're really stressed out, the body can't think logically. It's really interesting. So it's like when you're under intense cold, the body pulls blood away from the extremities because it's got to protect the more vital organs. The same thing happens when we're flooded with cortisol, is the body actually pulls blood away from the prefrontal cortex, which is where we're doing our logical and critical decision making. So if you're in high intense conflict, you're flooded with stress, emotions are running high, emotions going up, logical critical thinking's coming down. So it's not a coincidence that couples are like, I can't think straight, we're not hearing each other, you're not explaining things clearly, because we physiologically are incapable of doing so. So that's why 20 minutes is so important. And we're recognizing things aren't working. Let's go to our corners, do whatever you have to do to de-stress, whether it's, go on social media, read a book. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's helping you relax, and then come back. As long as we come back to the table, you're still going to be able to address what we need to, but it's so important that we stay in that more calm physiological state so that emotion comes down and critical thinking goes up, because that allows us to see things from the other perspective. When we're so emotional, we're so locked into our way of seeing things that that's why we can't hear what the other person is saying. We're not capable of doing so. So that's like why it's my favorite part, where couples are like, they just don't see it the way I see it. I'm like, right, because they're not actually capable of doing so. Right. So if we can change even that perspective, that it's not, they just don't want to see it my way. It's more of, we're just in so much conflict, they're not capable of doing so, even though they want to. We can really take a huge step forward in resolving it.
Yeah. I love that computer analogy you used.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing like my Mac with 20 tabs.
Yeah.
Just like working so hard, and at a certain point you just got to shut the computer down.
And what happens when the computer gets overloaded? We're like, come on, let's go.
Yeah,
and
you're
we're
going
stressing
so
it out
slow.
more, right? So it's our version of unplugging it and plugging it back in.
Yeah. What do you think is the resistance for couples to say, I don't want you to take 20 minutes?
They see it as they're losing. I think when they see their partner walking away, it's like they're taking it as, well, then I lost it. I didn't get the last word in that sense. So I think people are it comes back to that thing of like, I have to be right. I got to have the higher score. So I think it's that resistance of, if they leave, my point doesn't get heard, right? And therefore I can't be right. So we have to remember, it's not about being right or wrong. And if we can see the importance of both partners saying, we both need to take this 20 minutes and allow themselves to do so. Even if one partner doesn't think they need it, let the other person go and take it, because then you're naturally going to be taking that 20 for yourself. If you're out of the conflict, you're going to reset. But I think that's why they just get so hung up in the conflict that they forget how important it is for that 20 minutes to happen. Or they won't give themselves the full 20 minutes either.
Yeah. That mutual agreement is so important. It's almost like a contract. You have to come to the table and say, okay, these are the terms. We're going to agree to have this happen when this happens.
Which is part of the sound relationship house, because those rituals that couples engage in that foster that empathy. So when I say rituals, it's things like having a designated time to sit at the table and talk about your day. Always kissing each other and saying goodbye before you leave for the day. Those little things move the needle so much. So even making that a ritual of, we're going to each take 20 minutes, or I hope this doesn't spoil anything, but like in Ted Lasso, they model this. in one of the episodes where him and his wife are having a conflict and their code word is Oklahoma. And that's what they learned from couples therapy is that Oklahoma means like you just got to say what it is you have to say. So it can be a code word like that where it's like, you know what? Because again, critical thinking's come down. So maybe in that moment we can't think about it as, you know what? I'm really stressed out right now. I need to go take my 20 and reset because I can think that way right now. But if I'm in a really high conflict with my wife, I'm not going to think that way. But if we can just think of, say, a code word that's much easier to come to mind, and we both know what that means, I think that can help people a lot too in engaging in that ritual of taking the 20 minutes.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your experience in seeing couples implement this skill, what's the success rate of them being able to come back and have a resolution after one 20-minute break? Or does it sometimes require more than one 20-minute break? What does that look like?
Yeah, it depends. And that's where I wish I could observe them over the course to see how often they actually are taking it or how many times they need to. Mm-hmm. The important part is the coming back. Take your 20, even if you need 40, what have you, but are we coming back? And that's where I find couples don't do that enough. They'll take the 20, but they don't come back. And it's interesting because they go, well, we don't have the time. We're so busy. We're coming and going. But they have plenty of time to argue.
It takes up a lot of time, too. They'll probably be telling you about an hour or two fight or a fight that maybe lasted days. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, 20 minutes is a little faster than that.
You know what's so funny about the time thing is I heard this recently somewhere, and the guy I was watching said that if you use an excuse saying you don't have the time, just look at your screen time, and that will tell you that you actually do have the time.
Right, exactly. Even in the therapy session, you are carving out an hour to put the conflict aside and just talk about what's going on, learn skills, and what have you. And some couples will spend the entire session just arguing. And then I only have 5, and I feel bad because now we can't actually dissect it. We have to wait a whole nother week now, or sometimes more, depending on scheduling, to actually dissect what happened. So a lot of times that's where couples will get stuck is we're not using the time effectively, or sometimes couples will come into a session, especially in virtual therapy, straight from a conflict. Right? Now, in person, it can still happen because they're in the car, but sometimes that car ride can give them that time to, like, debrief. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times people are coming, like, straight from their lunch breaks. So you're also coming from a stress environment of work, or they're home and we're just going at it for hours, and now they're jumping on the call and they're trying to catch me up to speed as if because they feel like I need all this context to be able to help them dissect it. And that's what's interesting is I really don't need to know the details of the fight to actually, because I just need to look at communication patterns. Mm-hmm. So the details, not that they don't help, but they don't move the needle for what we're trying to actually work on, because the idea is that these skills can be applied to any conflict. It doesn't matter what it's about. So I wish couples almost, and that maybe that is a ritual some of them have to engage in, is that before you even get on the call, you're both taking that 20 minutes so we can actually use the time efficiently, give yourself that chance to reset and bring that critical thinking up so we can work through things together. So how it gets utilized is still something I'd want to know more, and that's where I wish I could do the real world kind of
course.
System.
Yes. Are you noticing that sometimes people will take that 20 minutes? Do they ever come back and say, maybe that fight wasn't that big of a deal and we don't even need to dissect it? Is sometimes that the solution, or should that not be completely the solution?
It's funny you say that, because in the therapy session a lot, I'll give like my feedback and my observations, and a lot of times people go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then they reflect on what they were fighting about was maybe very trivial. Or maybe it wasn't trivial, but just the way they were communicating about it brought it to another level that it didn't need to be at. So the 20 minutes is really important to just bring that stress level down, but it's not the end all be all. Right. So I certainly would want people to understand that just because you're taking that 20 minutes and then you come back and you go at it again doesn't mean that the 20 minutes isn't effective. We just have to make sure we're using the tool for the right job. And the job is just to regulate yourself.
Right.
But it still matters how we communicate when we're trying to resolve something.
Yeah, that's huge.
So let's talk about some of the other tools. Yeah. Like we talked about ritual building. The ritual building is instinctual. You're more proactive about doing positive things with your partner and building that relationship. For couples that have been together for a long time and have a history of arguing, that takes a little bit more work to keep that up.
As hard as it is to break a bad habit, it's even harder to establish a new one. Because with a bad habit, you don't necessarily have needed a good habit first, but with making a good habit, you have to first break the old habit. So there's a lot more work involved. So that's why it can take a really long time, and that's why I would encourage people to play the long game, because we are trying to undo a lot of bad habits of how we communicate, while at the same time learning new concepts and then trying to apply them as efficiently as we possibly can. So there's a lot of failure involved in couples therapy. Not failure in the sense of like the relationship doesn't work out, which unfortunately does sometimes happen, but failure in the sense of using the skills in the way that we would like to. So part of what I also do is to help people change their definition of what failure is. That failure is an opportunity for growth. Okay, something didn't work here. Let's understand what didn't work so we can make adjustments the next time. But if we only focus on that something's not working, how are we supposed to improve it? Right? Imagine if an engineer just looked at the problem and was like, well, it's broken. Like, yeah, but I brought you here to fix it. How do I fix it? It's broken. Yeah. Right? It failed. Right. You know, so therapy is not a pass-fail kind of thing. But it requires a lot of work because we have to undo one way of thinking and then reestablish a different way of thinking. And that transition is a very slow and steady progress.
Do you ever find that people just come back to session feeling defeated because maybe they weren't able to implement something that you talked about in a previous session? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll have couples where they'll have these good streaks. This happens a lot in this context. They'll have these good streaks where communication's going really well, and it had been turbulent for a while, and then it's smoothed out for like almost a month. And all of us are like, oh, maybe we're at that cruising altitude. And then they'll have that slip up. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, we've regressed. We completely backslid. Nothing's working. And it's like they feel like they're all the way back to square one. So I try to do this reframe. I'm like, when's the last time we were here? Right? Like the last time you guys actually came into a session and it was this contemptuous, right? Or this turbulent. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, it actually has been a while. And that's the thing. Are they getting fewer and farther between? Not a question of are they happening? How often are they happening? So that happens a lot. People feel defeated. They'll come in, they're like, oh, we fought again, or it got really bad. We thought this was working. I hear that a lot. They feel so defeated. We thought we were making progress, and now here we backslid. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean you backslid. This was going to happen eventually. It's how did we manage it, right? So that's where I want them to learn from that is let's still focus on what's working, or ask couples like, do you feel like you're plateauing or do you feel like you're backsliding? Because if you're plateauing, that means something's working where it's not getting worse, right? So I want to help them see that just because you hit this rough patch, it's just a bump in the road and you keep going.
Yeah, like what's the trajectory look like?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like therapy in general. Someone comes in and they say, oh, I'm really anxious. Well, we're not going to tell them you're never going to be anxious again in your life. We're just going to help you manage it. We're going to help you feel less anxious. We're going to hope that you don't feel as anxious and that you're not having as many panic attacks as you were before. But it's not that you're never going to feel anxious again. I think that's why that good enough, like going back to that, is so powerful because perfection is just not going to happen in therapy no matter what you're coming in for.
I mean, going from fighting, if you're a couple going from fighting every day to once a month is a life changer.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that's why I want them to see just because you had that fight for the first time in a month doesn't mean you backslid. That's a good thing. It's been a whole month when it was on a daily occurrence. Right? So I wish there was more. I mean, the Gottmans have a checklist. There's like their assessment for couples therapy. There really is no like PHQ per se for couples therapy. And I wish there was a more objective measure to track that over time for this exact kind of thing. So we kind of have to come up with our own measuring stick. And that's one of them is how long has it been since our last really big blow up to help them see that just because you had a spike in anxiety or you had a depressive episode if it was an individual. But if it was more severe 3 months ago, right? If you scored a 20 on the PHQ 3 months ago and now you're scoring a 12, don't look at it as a 12. Oh, that's still a high number. Yeah. It was a 20 3 months ago. Right. So it's the same thing. And that's where I want therapists who are ambivalent of couples therapy to see it the way that you put it is that you're not really working that much differently. You're still applying the same perspective of helping an individual. It just looks a little different.
Right. Exactly. If you could put the perfect timing for a married couple to start couples counseling, like what is the point where you're like, okay, that conflict is now would be a really good time for you to be in therapy? What would that look like?
I would say the sweet spot would be the water starting to boil, but it hasn't started over boiling. Because with that starting to boil, that means there's
got a nice simmer going.
Yeah, that's it. There's enough going on for us to work with, but they're not at such a conflictual place where they're getting lost in the bad habits and the patterns and stuff like that. I wish people didn't wait so long to go because sometimes there is this point of no return where they're so ingrained in the conflict that I've had couples be like, you're our Hail Mary, which I'm like, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
That's a lot.
But if you're coming to therapy as your Hail Mary, then what does that say about where things are at by the time you've decided to cross this bridge? So that simmer to me would be the perfect sweet spot, because there's nothing going on where there's nothing to work on, but there's not so much going on where it's almost too much. It's just enough for us to be able to identify patterns, implement skills effectively, and the emotion is not so high where we're going to constantly get dysregulated.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's such a big deal. And what about just major life events for couples? Would you suggest, hey, you're about to have a baby or get married or move? Would you say that couples counseling is helpful just in general when people are going through big life changes?
So that's actually what got me into it. So like I said, the reason I started working for that perinatal program is because I was a recent dad myself, and I remember going through the struggles and how it affected the communication. It's like, I really want to help young parents work through this, right? Because I remember the best source for me to turn to were other people with kids who can be like, validate just what I was going through.
Yeah.
So definitely young parents for the first time
Should be mandatory couples counseling.
Absolutely. And it's funny because what's the old saying when you have a kid, right? There's no manual. But that's always referring to the developmental stuff, the stages. There's plenty of manuals for that. There's the What to Expect book.
There's almost too many. There's too many manuals.
I would totally agree. But there is no playbook for what it's going to do to your relationship and how it's going to affect your communication. And that's where couples therapy can really be helpful, because you throw a big life transition into the mix, buying a home, having a kid, changing jobs, moving. Of course, you're shaking things up, so there's going to be communication problems. Yeah. I almost wish hospitals almost promoted it more, not in the sense of like you must, but like this would be very helpful as you're about to venture on something neither of you have ever done before and have literally no idea what's going to come from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just hand you the baby.
Like,
good luck with the baby. Good luck on your relationship. That'll be X amount of money. Right?
Exactly. It's like, why aren't you coming with me?
Yeah. But it really is. It's so true. It's never the focus. The focus a lot of times is the mom when she's pregnant. Then it's the baby when the baby is born. Yeah. Maybe the mom's checked up on 1 or 2 times. We all, we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of that. But no one really focuses on what is this going to do to you as a couple. And it's one of the hardest life transitions a couple could possibly go through.
Yeah. And nobody's exempt from postpartum mood disorders. So men experience postpartum mood disorders not as much as women because of the hormonal differences. But if I recall, the statistics are 1 in 10 men will suffer from a postpartum mood disorder, which could be depression, could be anxiety. So it's not necessarily that its own unique type of depression or anxiety. It's just during that first year of life. And those mood disorders can absolutely impact, how we're interacting with each other, because life is not spontaneous anymore. Without kids, you can go out to dinner whenever you want. You don't have to think about it. You can get out the door in a very realistic amount of time. Packing for things is less stressful. You throw that kid, now there's all this extra stuff. There's more stress naturally. You're not sleeping well, which is the number one protective factor from mood disorders, is getting good sleep, which is hard for young parents because you're not going to get the sleep that you need to regulate yourself, which is why learning these skills is even so much more important in a stage of life like that, because we're not able to manage our stress in the way that we used to. And now we're just in this black hole of unknown with no GPS to guide us through it.
Yeah, and that education piece, I think, can be so valuable to people, just to say, hey, this is a really hard life transition, and here's what you can expect. And if these feelings come up or this communication issue comes up, it's normal, and you can have support to work through it. That's so valuable, because people have these things happen, and all of a sudden they're thinking, what's happening to my relationship? Why are we not communicating? Now I have all this stress from the baby and whatever else is going on. Yeah. And I think just having a professional say, hey, it's normal that this is hard, but it doesn't have to be normal that your relationship is going this way. There's things you can do to help that. That would be so empowering.
It's why I'll go out of my way to tell parents, especially the younger parents, that I have kids.
Yeah.
And I know, like, self-disclosure sometimes is that gray area with therapy, but I do really strongly believe it has its place, and you just have to use it the right way.
Yeah.
Because especially with parents, they want to know that they're talking to another parent, somebody who gets it. Especially if you don't even know what parenting is. If you're talking to somebody and you don't know if they're a parent or if they have kids at all. So now I have to explain to you what parenting is like when I don't even know what it's like.
And where do you begin with that?
Right. And then I have to feel like I can trust you to walk me through something that I don't even know if you understand it. Right. So you see like the comfort in people, right? When and they all the time, they're like, I really appreciate you saying that, because it just puts us on a level playing field. If I want them to be vulnerable with me, I got to meet them halfway somewhere. There's obviously that professional line, but just saying, look, I have kids. I've been through the struggles. I know what it's like to not get sleep and it be erratic and your kid's throwing a tantrum and you're not communicating with your partner and it feels like stuff's unraveling and things like that. Just so they know that they're among a common party where they don't have to explain it, and somebody they can have that trust that they have somebody who's been through it who can guide them in the way they need to be guided.
Yeah. Yeah. And when your youngest is 2, you're like, I'm on the other side of this. I'm not in the newborn phase anymore.
Go back to the newborn phase anytime.
I know. I was just thinking that the other day. I'm like, oh, it was a lot easier when she was in one spot, not going anywhere.
And that's the journey of parenting. It's like, oh, got to get through this phase, got to get through this phase. And then the next phase hits and you're like, oh, got to get through this phase.
I thought the 2s were terrible until I hit the 3s, and I was like, no, the 2s are okay.
Our daughter just turned 3.
Oh my gosh.
We love her very dearly, but it's been a couple weeks, and
the 3-nager term is very real.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And it's funny because I think at least when they're a toddler, you don't have the other factors of when they're a newborn. As parents, you feel a little bit more like yourself, maybe a little bit more equipped to deal with it. But I think when it's your first child, I kind of feel like no matter what, every new phase they go through, it's uncharted territory.
And it's so funny because it's almost like, I don't think they think about this consciously, but they react to each other as if they expect that they know how to handle something neither of them know how to handle.
Yeah.
So I'll remind them, especially if they're talking about parenting, and go, is this your first kid or is this your oldest kid? And if they go, yes, I go, okay, so let's remember every stage of their life you have never gone through before.
Yes.
Right? So this is all new for both of you, which means you're both naturally at a higher level of anxiety because your anxiety is going, here's all these horrible things that could happen. I can't technically tell you that they won't because I don't have that crystal ball, right? But the opposite could happen as well. But it's like they can almost expect each other to handle it better. But if you don't know what to expect, how can you handle it?
Right.
Because everything is at a 10.
Yeah. And every stage, there's like big conversations that need to be had about big topics, that have never been navigated before. So.
Right. And the topics that couples need the biggest help with are, how are we going to manage our relationship? Right. Like on all aspects, whether it's just that emotional attachment is like the first thing that goes out the window across, whether it's through physical interaction or just spending time with each other, because so much gets dedicated towards the baby, which is understandable. The baby's very dependent, but we sacrifice the relationship, like why we even decided to start a family in the first place. So a lot of the work I'll do with couples is to help them find going back to those rituals, like what are you guys doing to foster the emotional bond between you guys? If you're telling me that you're going through the motions, you feel like your ship's passing in the night, then you're not prioritizing the relationship. And maybe you can't prioritize it in the way that you used to before the baby. Bless you.
Sorry, thank you.
But you have to find different ways to prioritize it. So I've kind of found Tetris to be my analogy in this kind of way. So Tetris just gives you a puzzle. You have no way of preparing for that puzzle. You just make it work. Baby, make it work. But the pieces fall from the sky and you do have some control over them. You can move them around, you can twist them around, and you can also see if I twist it and move it here, it fits better in this way, even though I really want it to go there. But as we know, the game plays, you try and shove a piece where it doesn't really go, the game's going to be over. So if you look at life like Tetris, it's like I can still have what I want. I just got to finagle it in a way to make it work with the puzzle that life is giving me. And if we look at it more that way, it gives people more that sense of autonomy and control, that there still is a way to make it happen. Are we willing to do it differently, though? And sometimes there's a bit of a struggle with that.
I love that analogy.
That's a great
That is
analogy.
such a good analogy. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think that it's the expectation setting. I think having that come from a therapist is probably really powerful, because I think there's a lot of mourning that happens with relationships when they have a baby. And I don't know how many people expect that. And I think to talk through that and to say, okay, this is what the relationship looked like pre-baby. What can the relationship look like after baby? And it might look very different. It's likely going to look very different, but that's okay. But it's also okay to mourn and miss what your relationship was. And I think that's actually a really big part of the process.
Which is interesting, because going back, you were like saying like, oh, it should be mandated, right? But if you have a baby, who comes into the room? the neonatologist, you get a lactation consultant that comes in, you get all these other professionals, but no mental health professionals. They'll go, oh, if postpartum depression, here's all these resources, but no mental health licensed professional comes into that room.
It's unreal.
And talks about exactly what you just brought up. And imagine how much more effective that would be, not to have a therapy session with them, just to be like, hey, here's somebody from a different side of healthcare who is going to help you get some insight on what could happen. And then if you feel like you need therapy, here are some resources. But just to introduce the idea that your relationship is about to get flipped upside down in ways that you can't possibly anticipate.
Yeah, nobody really prepares you for it. And I wish it was more like marital counseling. Premarital counseling is a standard thing. A lot of couples before they get married go through premarital counseling as part of the process. And I feel like it should be the same with
pre-baby counseling.
Pre-baby counseling.
Yeah, we'll start advocating for it.
There we go. This is where it was born right here. Timestamp this conversation.
Yes. You don't want to scare couples, right? Because it is such a beautiful thing, and there's nothing as special as becoming parents. But it's like anything you do that is important or a major life event, there's just going to be a hard parts of it. So I think normalizing that and being supportive of that is so major. And I feel like just going and having a professional tell you these things is like that this is okay. And if you work on it, you can come out the other side even better. I think when you're in the middle of it, you're not seeing that. You don't have that hope all the time.
Yeah, it definitely is not meant to scare people, but I do want to be real with people.
Yeah.
Like, because if you put on this rose-colored glass, it's all going to be wonderful. People are going to get knocked back a lot harder, right? If you know what's coming, you can't be blindsided by it. So if you're direct and transparent with couples and say, look, it's going to be hard. Right? We don't know what hard's going to look like. It's going to be some bobbing and weaving. There's some things will be easier and some things might be a lot harder than we would want them to be. But if we anticipate it feeling hard, then when it does, we're like, all right, I knew this was coming. So then we don't get that blindside feeling, which is, I think, happens to a lot of people. They don't really know what to expect in the relationship side of things. And that's why it knocks them back so hard.
Yeah.
If you were going to work with a couple that was about to have a baby, for their relationship, what would you say would be the key couple things that you would want to work on them with?
Yeah, I would want them to identify what are the aspects of their relationship they want to really make sure are prioritized after baby. Is it having date nights? Is it binge watching the same shows? Is it maintaining your sex life? Right? Which is, I know, very taboo for a lot of people, but a lot of the conflict starts because the sex goes out the window. And you can't have it the way you did when, after the baby. So people just stop having it all together, and that fosters a lot of conflict as well. So things like that, I think if they know what it is, what the pieces are that they need to make fit, then once the game of Tetris starts, they can already have a little bit of a jump on how those pieces need to look to get them to fit the way they ideally would like to. And things will never be fully ideal, but if we play our cards right, you can get pretty close.
Yeah. And it's interesting to have that conversation too, because you can see, okay, what does my partner prioritize? Because maybe you're thinking, okay, yeah, date nights were fun, but we don't need that right now. You don't need a couple coming in 6 years later being like, we don't have date night anymore, and that was so important to me. But the other person might not realize that, because it's not that they don't want to spend time with that person, but maybe watching Netflix was enough for them and they don't need that date night. So I think having that conversation ahead of time, that sounds really important, because then you can know, okay, might not be important to me, but it's important to my partner. So I'm going to now prioritize it. And then you're not talking about it 6 years later.
Yeah, so Gottman talks a lot about like bids for attention. So it's things that we're like, hey, I would really like for us to watch this show. Or when sometimes people will ask something they want, being like, hey, you want to go see that movie tonight? Where internally they're like, I want to go see that movie. But instead of just saying, I want to go see that movie, let's go, they're asking to get their partner on board. Then their partner says no, because they don't. And then they get really disappointed and frustrated. They never want to do anything.
Yeah.
Right? But we weren't transparent. We weren't direct in saying, I want to go. Would you like to do this with me? But we also want to see, that's a bid. Right, me asking you, do you want to go to this movie, is my bid for attention, not attention seeking, like look at me, but a bid for I want to connect with you in this way. So Gottman was like, you either turn towards a bid or you turn away from a bid. And a lot of times where couples are getting stuck is they're turning away. There's all these bids, they're flying everywhere, and they're turning away from all of them because they're not seeing them the way that they need to be seen. It could be something as small as just me looking out the window and saying, wow, it's like really nice out today. If you just even acknowledge that I said something, you're still turning towards the bid. But if you ignore it, then you're turning away from me. And how am I supposed to feel heard and understood and feel like we're connecting if you're not receiving my bids for attention the way that you want me to receive yours.
Yeah. And one person is probably not even realizing that they're even doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a great video from the Gottman Training about this. And so that idea of the woman looking out the window, that was literally the clip. The husband's doing, I think it was like a Sudoku or a jigsaw puzzle on the paper. And she made a comment, and he's so lost in the puzzle, he didn't hear her, but she takes it as he's ignoring me. So that can happen a lot too, where it's like you're just so entrenched, and that can happen in conflict. So another physiological thing that happens is diffuse physiological arousal, or DPA, where the body gets so flooded, we go into this tunnel vision, where we're actually not able to process all these things that are going on around us. We're just so hyper fixated on what's happening because that's how our body's trying to protect itself. But then, so when couples are like, I didn't even hear what he or she said, but then we understand, but look at all of the stress you are under. Your brain can only handle so much. So it's blocking out the background noise, which unfortunately included your partner's comment, but it was being perceived as you're ignoring me.
Right, because you actually probably didn't hear that person.
Yep.
Or you just, couldn't process what they were
didn't
saying.
hear them at all. It wasn't even like white noise. It was just, their brain's just trying to stay focused on what is the task at hand.
Yeah, yeah. The bid, when you were talking about the bids, it reminded me, I'll give a little anecdote. Don't worry, I won't get too personal. But we usually like once a week or once every other week, we'll order takeout. And there was a couple times where Brandon's like, oh, you like want to get sushi tonight? And I'm like, oh no, I don't really want to like get takeout. We'll just eat at home. And then a day came up where all day I was just thinking, oh, it'd be so nice just to get sushi tonight. And what'll be a really nice night. And I was like, oh, do you want to get takeout tonight? And he's like, oh, I don't really feel like it tonight. And then I was like, is this how you feel when you ask me to get takeout and I say no? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to say no to that again. And now whenever he's like, do you want to get sushi? I'm like, yes, let's get sushi. So now I know how it feels on the other end to be like, no, I don't want to get that. And I'm like all day thinking about it, so excited. And then I'm like, oh, it's okay. We don't have to get it. Then I'm like, oh, wait, that kind of stinks.
But how much it changes where instead of it's like, hey, do you want this? When secretly I want it, is just coming out and saying, I want sushi.
Yeah, like, I would like to get that tonight.
And it's okay if you don't want sushi, but you're still allowed to have what you want for dinner.
Right.
I think that's kind of something couples get lost in, is that they have to agree on everything. And you don't. You're allowed to have you're allowed to go to bed at different times. You're allowed to eat different things for dinner. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, well, there have been plenty of times where I've still gotten my sushi.
Yeah. It's so funny. It did change to that because I noticed that. So there's a couple times where I'm like, I don't really want takeout tonight, but why don't you get sushi? And then
it doesn't quite hit the same.
I know it doesn't taste the same, but then we'll still watch our show or do whatever we're doing and still eat it together. But it's not, okay, this other person can't have it because I didn't want it. But it's so funny when you just take yourself out and you think about it from their perspective. Yeah. It feels so different. You're like, oh man, you don't think about that all the time in the moment.
Because perspective is subjective.
Yeah.
Right? Like we only see things the way that we see it. So the three of us could watch a fender bender and we could give the cop 3 different reports, even though we watched this, because we all have different perspectives. We saw it from different angles. And that happens where you're still 2 individual people trying to coexist together. Yeah. Right. So it's going to be yin and yang. So if we can acknowledge that we have different perspectives on things, those perspectives are subjective. So by default, they're right. Right. If I tell you your perspective is wrong, I am now challenging your reality. Yeah. Of course you're going to get defensive.
That's a separate problem.
Exactly, right? So if we just agree that our perspectives are different and that's okay, then we can explore those differences through a place of curiosity, which will allow for more understanding, as opposed to a place of, you don't see it the way I do, now I judge you.
Yeah. I think something that I saw a lot when I was doing a lot of couples work is that opposites really do attract. And so many couples who they have the best relationships are polar opposites. But you have to figure out how to make that work. And going back to that perspective thing, you want someone who is going to see a situation different from you because they're going to have strengths where you have weaknesses and vice versa. But if you always look at that, you're not seeing this exactly how I'm seeing it. Well, yeah, that's why you want to be with someone who's different from you, because you want someone to come in and look at a situation in an opposite way. If you use it the right way, it's actually so beneficial. But I think a lot of couples see that as, well, this isn't going to work because we're so different.
We don't have anything in common.
But that's actually a really good thing.
Right, yeah. No, I definitely have learned that couples are very yin and yang in the sense that there's going to be contrast, but there's a little bit of each in both. So they still complement each other.
Yeah.
So if we look at it more like that, and even with the opposites attract is so true, because the whole saying of there's two people in the world, the people who need to clean up before they can relax and the person who needs to relax before they can clean up, and they marry each other. And it's so common that you get these difference in personalities. And I'll remind couples, you are two individual people, different backgrounds, different mindsets, different customs, different lessons that you've been conditioned to learn, and you're attempting to coexist together. And sometimes that's going to go well, and sometimes that's not.
Yeah.
And so we can look at it as more yin and yang and not look at our contrasts as signs of problems, but just as a natural part of the territory, then it can really bring down that conflict.
Yeah. It's like learning to use that the right way can be such a superpower. It's like you're talking about the person who needs to clean up. If two people never wanted to clean up, your house would be a disaster.
Yep.
And if two people were obsessive about cleaning their house, there would be no relaxing. So finding that balance between that yin and yang, which is something they can do in therapy, I think could be so beneficial.
Yeah. My wife and I went through, so kind of even the playing field, like we went through where she's more of the, like, I need the house to be tidied before we can relax, and I was still kind of am more of the, like, I need to sit and take my 20 and then I'll go clean. And I would get stressed out because she's running around and then she's getting upset with me because I'm not up and getting stuff. So it forced me though to start doing a little bit more, and now it allows me to see it more from her perspective of, if the house is clean and calm, I can actually relax. Right? And she's like, yes.
You're like, yeah, that was the point.
It's like, if you listen to me, but it speaks that if we can really hear what the other person is trying to get us to do and allow ourselves to see it from the other person's perspective. You don't have to agree with them. Agreeing with somebody and accepting it are not synonymous. And a lot of people get that twisted. So I can see things from your perspective. I can accept how you see it. I don't still have to agree with it though. But if we can be open to looking at it from that other angle, and then it opens up our perspective of, maybe mine's not the, like, gospel way of looking at things. And that's where people can grow together, or it can push them further apart.
Yeah, I think it's so important because in that moment is coming together and saying, okay, we're a team, right? We have this house that we need to keep together. We have these kids that we have to take care of. We have these jobs you have to work out, right? There's all these things. But at the end of the day, you're a team and you're trying to do this together. And I think having that perspective is so helpful. And for couples who come once a week to therapy and they do take it really seriously, it's putting that time aside to say, being a team is really important and we're going to focus on it for that reason. Instead of this person versus that person, it's how can we come together and make all of these external things work and not impact our relationship in a super negative way.
Yeah. The couples who sometimes they come because it's just the conflict's gotten too much, but I think sometimes couples get to the point where they don't want to work on it anymore. The motivation, they've gotten so frustrated that instead of it being like our weekly check-in and what do we want to take away from this, they just get tired of the same cycle. And those are more like the hardest ones. And not in the sense of like I wasn't able to help them, it's just that we got to a point where we didn't want to continue trying to make this work. And that's an unfortunate place to be, which is why I wish people came more when it was simmering than boiling, because that would give us more of a chance to prevent it from getting to that place.
Yeah. Are you seeing that some couples are coming to therapy to figure out that they don't want to be together anymore?
I've had some come, they're like, we want to figure out if this is going to work or not, which I wish wasn't necessarily the mentality, because my job isn't to help you come to that conclusion per se. My job is to help give you tools to improve and strengthen things. So if you're now if at the same token though, if that's what got us in the door, so be it. So if we need to figure out if this is going to work, I guess it depends on what pretense. We see that we're struggling. We see that the pot's starting to simmer. And we don't really know how to do this, and we don't know if this is going to be our end-all, be-all. Like, let's go get some help. And then I think under that pretense, we can be very productive. But I think it's like we're already at our wit's end, and we just need a professional to say it's going to work or it's not, which I'm not going to say to a couple, you guys should get divorced. That's beyond the ethical boundaries of what my role is for. But if that's what they're looking for me to do, then they might also get frustrated because they're like, we're not really confident in this. We're not getting a straight, like, we want somebody just to tell us, and this person's not, or they're not going to, and then they just decide they're just going to make the call for themselves.
Do you ever see couples who come in, or maybe ex-couples who are co-parenting, and they're not coming in necessarily for marriage counseling, but they just want help co-parenting, or the relationship is already over, but we still need some more positive communication.
Yeah, no, I've definitely worked with divorced or separated parents who co-parent, and I love those experiences and there's one set of parents I can think of off the top of my head because they were the model for co-parenting well, even though you're not married. And even when they got divorced, it was not a clean divorce, but they learned how to work through stuff and they're able to parent very well. But I've also had parents who have been separated and they're trying to co-parent, but they're not at a place emotionally. So like emotionally, they're still married. Is the way I looked at it. Is like they're fit legally, there's no ring on their finger, but emotionally and mentally, they're still going at it as if they were married, which impacts their co-parenting.
Of course.
And I try to remind them, you don't have to be in love with each other to be good parents. You just have to be civil at minimum. But sometimes the conflict is so intense that just being civil is just a too far-fetched goal at that point. So I'm still doing the same interventions with co-parents because there's a lot they have to work through. The question I'll ask them, though, is do you want to work through these things, right? You've already decided you don't want to be with this person anymore, but you still have to make it work with them for a different reason. But the same issues that led to the divorce are impacting the parenting.
Yeah.
And I really try to help couples who take that step back and remember there's a third party here who is now collateral in all of this, right? They didn't do anything. So I try to frame that as motivation of can we put our stuff aside or work through it for the benefit of parenting our kid. Some are able to, some are not able to. And that's what Gottman found with these patterns is that some couples just aren't going to work. You can do therapy for years, you can do all the skills, you can try everything. Sometimes it's just too much yin and yang. And sometimes knowing when that is the case is actually more therapeutic than trying to muscle through the muck of it all.
Yeah. Is there anything when people are dating that they can look at, okay, this is a red flag, and maybe getting engaged or getting married to this person is probably not going to be a good idea?
Yeah, don't ignore those red flags.
Yeah.
Not saying like turn tail and run, but use those red flags as like, okay, this is something we need to really figure out before we make this a very legally binding operation kind of thing. And that probably happens more often than not because by the time couples come to therapy with the conflict they're having, it wasn't recent. Maybe the issues are all novel in themselves, but this is something that's been building for a very long time that probably hadn't gotten addressed at the time that it did. So if people were more, what's the word, I guess preemptive with going to therapy, just to like, hey, we're seeing some issues. We don't really know how to navigate them. We want to take that next step, but we want to make sure this stuff is solid. They probably will be set up a lot more for success down the road because now the red flags aren't red flags anymore, or they know how to be good enough at managing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone once told me that red flags never turn green. And I found that to be true.
Yeah.
You don't want to ignore them. Yeah, I think that's really important because a lot of people think, oh, if we just get married, everything will be better. Oh, if we just have a baby, everything will get better. And we know that that's not the solution.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to throw more gas on that fire.
Definitely not the solution.
Way more gas.
Whoever came up with that saying needs to come see me. But,
yeah, I don't know about that, but I think people do truly think, oh, that this is going to make things better. If we just get married, everything will get better. So I love that you said, no, that's not just going to magically make things better, and pay attention to it. Don't just ignore it.
Yeah, and it's funny because one of the things that Gottman really preaches is that when you're accepting somebody, you are also taking on the baggage that comes with that person. Everybody has baggage. There is no such thing as the baggageless person. But if you ignore that baggage or you just don't want to touch it, then you're never going to actually you have to learn how to live with it because it comes with this person. So looking at those red flags and being transparent and saying, hey, this bothers me. But we have to be willing to explore it from a place of curiosity. Not like you're doing this and it's driving me crazy, but from a place of like, hey, I'm noticing this, right? And it's really bothering me. What can we do about that? So the Gottmans have this style of communication called doing a gentle startup, where instead of being like, you're doing this and it's making me mad, they break it up into 3 pieces. So there's that I feel statement. So not you're making me mad, as I'm feeling mad, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling stressed about the situation, right? I'm frustrated that or that the kitchen's very messy at the end of the night. So you try and take the yous out of it as much as possible, right? So it doesn't count if you're like, I feel mad that you're not doing this. That doesn't count. But if you're like, I feel frustrated that our kitchen's always a mess before we go to bed, it's a lot of we. Now we're talking about a neutral situation between the two of us. And then what do I need, right? I need a little bit more emphasis from us to make sure that the kitchen's a little bit more tidy. So it's not critical, it's not defensive, it's not attacking, but you're still addressing the issue just in a way that's more empathetic and fosters more communication and understanding.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what is the bigger picture issue that's affecting us and how can we tackle it together? Not just, what can you do to make this better? Because you're making me mad. It's, this is an issue. What is the solution? And maybe the solution for someone is, hey, I need 20 minutes when I come home from work before I clean the house. I need that time. I need to decompress. Like, we can each clean for a half hour. We'll put a timer on. You could do it as soon as you get home and I'll do it 20 minutes later. Whatever that solution that works is. But I love that's coming more out of it. Here's a problem we can attack together, not I'm mad at you because you didn't clean. Because someone's going to be defensive to that, obviously.
The Gottman Method pairs really well with emotionally focused therapy, which basically looks at there's a cycle going on between the two partners, and they're both feeding that cycle. So if you can get them to stop looking at what the other person's doing to contribute to that cycle, and more, what am I doing to contribute this cycle, then you can start a new cycle with more effective communication. So I find that the two modalities really pair very well together to help them understand emotionally what's going on that's like triggering our insecurities, or people have fear of abandonment, or that their partner's going to leave them, or things will never get better, and that feeds the conflict. So understanding what's feeding the cycle and then pairing that with the actual tools and the roadmap that the Gottman Method provides, I find really complement each other really well.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I think all these tools and tactics are just so beneficial. And I think it's things that they're not just going to come to you intuitively. Maybe some of them will. I mean, if you're a very self-aware person in a relationship, which, God bless you, that's amazing. But I think for your average person, it does take work. And I think that this is such an important conversation to highlight that fact that it takes work, and it's okay that it takes work. I think sometimes people think relationships should be easy and everything should just always be going really well, but it's okay that it takes work sometimes.
Oh, I tell all my couples, if it feels hard, it should.
Yeah.
Because that means it's like, if it feels hard, that means you're giving it the effort it actually deserves. So even with parenting, right? If you're exhausted from the day and you're stressed out and you're frustrated, but at the same time you're wondering, am I doing enough for my kid? You're probably doing more than enough because you're so burnt out, because you're putting so much of yourself into it to want to be the best parent that you can, that it should feel hard. If it feels easy, so like with anxiety, for example, if you don't feel anxious about something, that also means you don't care about it. And sometimes it's good to feel anxious because it lets you know that you're taking something seriously.
Yeah.
Right? So if the relationship feels hard, that means that you care enough about it for it to feel hard. If it feels easy, that means, are we really investing as much? Are we actually just doing surface level going through the motions? Are we even just like casually dating each other? Or are we actually trying to build a relationship? It is a very hard thing. And I agree with you. If that difficulty became normalized, I think people would be less blindsided when it does actually feel that way.
Right. So we have a pretty fun activity here.
Sure.
Kind of go through it. We have some quick fire questions that we want to get your perspective on.
So you can answer these in one sentence, whatever comes to your mind first.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So what's the best time to have a hard conversation?
When things are the calmest. Again, going back to that, like if things, emotions are high, the conversation's not going to be constructive. So you have to decide where is that ideal time, and then that's the best time to do it.
Great. Okay. How about the most underrated relationship habit?
The most underrated relationship habit. Transparency. In the like, it's not emphasized enough. There's a lot of assuming that goes on in relationships, and that's what I've come to find. If people were willing to be more transparent and less concerned about, I'm going to hurt this person's feelings, and just say what it is. It matters how you say it, but if you're just direct with each other, so much can be resolved.
Okay. How about one sentence that instantly disarms tension?
I can definitely understand how you see it that way. End.
Love that.
That's a great one.
People tack stuff on, and that's where you just lose it.
Just stop talking.
People just want to know that they feel heard and seen. They don't want sympathy. They want empathy. And empathy is just, you know what? That does sound tough. And that sucks. For whatever it may be. If you just end it there, I think that's...
Period.
Yep.
No comma.
Okay, how about This is the last one for this section.
Yeah.
Red flag phrase in an argument.
You. Followed by whatever.
Love that. All right. And then we have some true or false questions for relationship beliefs. Okay. Conflict means something is wrong.
No. It just means that, there's something going on. Doesn't mean something's wrong. Conflict can mean anything. We just have to define what that conflict is.
Okay. We don't actually have answers to this. You are creating the answer. So you cannot have a wrong answer.
Awesome.
True or false? You should never go to bed angry.
True. Because if you're angry, you're in that distressed state. And when you're sleeping, you want to be relaxed. So especially if you're sleeping next to your partner. So if you're just stressed out and you're angry at your partner who you're now perceiving as your enemy and you're trying to sleep next to them in what's supposed to be a relaxed state, that's probably not going to go well for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Have you ever seen the reels where the wife wakes up and she's mad because the husband did something in the dream and then she wakes up like angry, like, you did this last night, and he's like, I was sleeping.
And sometimes you go to bed angry, you wake up like you wake up the way that you did going to bed.
Yeah.
So you're ending your day angry at your partner, but you start your day angry at your partner. So even if you need that extra half hour, if you're tired and it's like not the time, it's okay to say something's going on here. We need to talk through it. Now's not the time, but we will revisit. And that enough can just quell the storms, or you can actually go to bed maybe a little frustrated, which is definitely better than going to bed angry.
Yeah, definitely. Good relationships don't need therapy.
No, good relationships can still benefit from therapy.
Emotional flooding is always obvious.
No. If anything, it's not obvious at all, because it's that body's the sympathetic nervous system, right, producing the things that we don't see. You're not going to see me having stomach problems per se, or you're not going to see me. Sometimes we get really good at hiding them too. Like if I know I'm having a headache, you can't necessarily see me having that headache. So a lot of times those signs do fly very much under the radar.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
awesome. This was such a good conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the
for having me. This
podcast.
was awesome.
Yeah. For anybody who, is maybe in a relationship and they're interested in couples counseling, do you have any resources you could point them towards?
Modern therapy.
That's it. Don't go anywhere else.
Yeah, it's like with any therapy, it's finding the right fit. I tell all my clients, it doesn't matter how long I've been doing this, what pieces of paper I'll have sitting behind me or what have you. It's, does this work? Do you feel like we connect well? If you got to find that person that all parties feel comfortable with, and they feel that person has their best interest and they're neutral. So whether it is at modern therapy or it's somewhere else, it's just finding the person you feel the most comfortable with, because that will allow you to open up more and go further. If you don't feel comfortable with that person, why are you going to go into it deeper? So navigating the field and finding the right person can be a little tricky, but that should be, in my opinion, what's prioritized the most.
Yeah, we'll just do a little PSA that if you start therapy and you are not vibing with your therapist, try a new therapist. There's so many people who
I tell
are just
all
like,
my clients,
it didn't work.
Yep.
No, that person didn't work with you, and that's okay.
I tell them right from the get-go, I ask them, how do you feel about our back and forth? We have our intake, and I always say, like, the next session you'll get a better feel for me, because I don't have to hit all these areas in a very short amount of time. And I'll ask them, do you feel like we're vibing? Do you, like, I'm a horrible actor, so you either like this or you don't. I'm not pretending. Because if they say that, you know what, it's not working for me, I want to be like, that's okay. I don't have to be the guy for you. I'd like to be, but I don't want this to be a forced marriage either.
Right. And then someone else will be. So I think that's the most important thing, is if someone is listening who has tried therapy before, just try it again. Try it again, work with someone else.
Yeah, don't just assume that it's going to be the same every time. It really does matter about that fit with who you're working with.
Definitely. Awesome. This is amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you so
Thanks
much, Cory.
No, thanks, guys.